begin this Monday, July 11th, 2022, Norton Conservation Commission meeting. And we will begin, as has been our usual, by reading the preamble required since we are doing our meetings through Zoom remotely. So Dan, if you want to begin that.
Okay. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GL Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may be gathered in one place, that may gather in one place, the meeting of the Norton Conservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found at the end of this agenda. The public attending this public hearing / virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the meeting designated for public comment, raising their hand virtually or pressing *9 if participating by phone. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Norton Cable website, www.nortonmediacenter.org, an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting.
Thank you. And so tonight we do not have the benefit of having our conservation director, John Thomas, attending, but we do have Megan Harrop, being sure we don't make too many mistakes. And the members of the commission participating tonight are Ron O'Reilly, myself, Chair Julian Kadish, Dan Pearson, Mark Fernandez, Tom Vest, Lisa Carosa, Carrie Schneider, and I think that is a full board tonight. We will proceed. We have a list of 6 new public hearings. Most are fairly straightforward. So our first item of business is an order of conditions extension for 9 TP Trail. That's its file number 250-1013. Do we have a representative for that discussion? Looks like the request was filed by Paul Freeman, with the applicant being Richard Tula. No, I take it back. The applicant is Paul Freeman. So I don't see a representative of the applicant, but this is a very straightforward request. This is an existing order of conditions with regard to the building of a, let me read what it says here. The proposed project.
Julian, Mr. Tula is here.
Well, no, I misspoke. Mr. Tula actually is relevant to the next hearing.
Okay.
Yeah. Did everyone have a chance to review the application? I don't have a plan before me, but it had to do with building a house. The only question I had is whether the house is partially under construction now, but it's a simple request to ask for a 1-year extension on a order of conditions for the building of a single-family residence, and it's here in the Grove at 9 GP Trail. So John, in his review of it, said there were no issues and recommended a 1-year extension. So unless anybody has questions on the commission, we can consider that. But first, I need to ask if anyone in the audience has a question, and you can actually raise your hand or just take your mic off mute and ask your question. Otherwise, we will consider a motion for a 1-year extension of.
I'll make a motion to issue a 1-year
Second.
extension for DEP file number 250-1013.
Yeah, I was just trying to clarify if it was a standard file, and it appears to be a standard file. So motion was made by Lisa and seconded by Dan. And as we have been required, we need to do a roll call vote, and starting with Mark and Dan.
Aye.
Aye.
And Carrie and Lisa.
Aye. Aye.
And Tama and Ron.
Aye.
And I will throw in an aye as well. The motion carries for extension of the order of conditions for file number 250-1013 for 1 year. Next item on the agenda is a request for determination of applicability for determination number 1124 concerning 38 John Scott Boulevard. And as I understand it, that is where I believe Mr. Tula comes into play. Did I say that properly, Mr. Tula?
That is correct, yes, thank you.
And as I understand it, there is an existing house that was built on that site as a result of an order of conditions from 2008, and now you're requesting either installation of a pool, I'm not sure if the pool is already existing, and as well as a shed. So why don't you go ahead and describe what you want to do, and we'll ask any questions that are relevant.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay?
We
If
can.
you're also a
Okay,
co-host,
excellent.
so if you want to share your screen, you can. If you have the plans up.
Let's see, how am I going to do that? I'm used to Teams, not Zoom, but let's see if I can do this. What I'm basically looking to do is install a swimming pool. And I originally had applied and was allowed to, or had a permit to put a swimming pool, but didn't have the money to complete it back in 2008. What we're looking to do is to install the swimming pool, a shed, and also a small greenhouse on my property. And I believe everybody has the plans, so I'm going to try to see if I can pop this open here real quick. Bear with me for 1 second, please. Or two.
Yeah, I'm not sure everybody has the plan. I can describe it while you're trying to share the screen. The 100-foot buffer zone, it's in the outer portion of the buffer zone, the proposed pool. Only a portion of the pool is in the buffer zone. The proposed greenhouse is, I'm going to say, at about the 50-foot mark, and the proposed shed is 76 feet from the wetland border. But it's all within the original cleared footprint. Is that a fair statement?
That is, yes, except for the shed. The shed is slightly about probably 15 feet from the cleared, footprint.
And even a portion of the shed is actually not in the buffer zone, a small portion.
Correct.
So it's,
I'm trying to, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Speaking of the shed, just the orientation, if you rotate it parallel to the contours, you're gonna have a lot less grading. I'm just not quite sure about your orientation there and why you chose that. Was there a specific reason? You're fighting the grade, so if you just rotate it so that the back edge and the front edge are parallel with the contours, you'll have a lot less grading in there.
Yeah, so one of the things I was trying to do is not take down any trees. So other than small, probably 2 to 3 inch diameter trees. So I didn't want to take out some of the bigger old growth trees that were there. That's the reason why I was doing that, is to basically go straight in versus going at a different orientation.
You'd have the
What-
same footprint. It would be the same footprint, right?
Yes, and for some reason I'm having a hard time finding my plan and I have so many different drawings and so many different plans. But let me see if I could.
It's just something to consider to cut down on the grading back there.
Sure. Okay.
So if you just rotate it, you don't have that grading.
Oh, I see. Oh, you have it up. Okay, great. Okay, so rotate it so it's basically the long side is perpendicular to the house.
Yes, the front and the back are parallel, running parallel with the contours. It will just cut down on your grading.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I can do that. That's easy to do.
I mean, if your footprint's going to be the same, you might as well.
and if you do,
So that's
Yeah,
what I had.
Yeah, the only thing I was trying to do is I was trying to sneak it in between 2 trees. Like just go straight back between 2 trees. What I can do is I can put it more towards the house and avoid that one tree that's probably about a 20 inch diameter tree that I was trying to avoid taking down.
Okay. I mean,
But I can rotate it. That's not a problem. I can do that.
Okay. I mean, whatever works best for you. Either way, it's in the outer, buffer zone. So
just a word of caution. If it's that tight between 2 20-inch trees, it may be prudent to take one of them down because as the shed sits there, both trees will grow and potentially get very uncomfortably close to your shed. And any kind of weather, I don't know. You may need you'll have to decide. You may need a little bit of a clearing to make that shed functional without a lot of unwanted maintenance.
I will have about 4 feet in between the each side of the shed. So at least I have a 4 feet passage in between.
And I think
sure, I can rotate it. That's not a problem.
All right.
I can do that.
Our conservation director is out for this meeting. He will be back soon. Any details I think you can easily discuss with him, but I don't think action on this request tonight will depend on his input. So the plan is straightforward. Any questions from members of the commission? And any questions from members of the audience? And again, there is a way to raise your hand if you go to the reactions button, but you can also just take your mic off mute and ask a question if you have one. Otherwise, if there are no further questions, this is a request for determination of applicability. And if we approve the plan, which actually sounds odd because it will be a negative determination, but the negative part means you do not, there is no need to file a formal notice of intent, but you are bound by the plan you submit with the exception of the proposed changes that we've discussed. So if there are no further questions, we can consider a motion to close the request for determination, 1124. Say again, was that a question or?
If there are no comments from the audience or questions, I'll make a motion to issue a negative 3 for DET file number 1124, 38 Johnstown Boulevard.
Well, actually, what we need to do is wrap in closure of the hearing into that motion, and we may need to close it and then repeat the motion.
Yeah, right. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for file number DET 1124.
Second.
Motion made by Lisa and seconded by Dan. Again, roll call vote, starting with Mark and Dan.
Aye.
Aye.
And Carrie and Lisa.
Aye.
And Tama and Ron.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. So the motion carries. We're now back in a regular meeting. We can consider a quick motion on a negative determination for file number 1124.
I just had one question. What is that? What does a negative determination mean?
Yeah, it means that your project will be approved as submitted, and the negative part means you do not need to file a notice of intent, because the title of this process is a request for determination of applicability, which means you can either have the project approved as it's submitted, or you need to go through the more extensive notice of intent process.
Okay.
But because this is somewhat of a limited project, it's perfectly acceptable to be decided as a determination, and a negative determination means you're all set, and it just has to do with the paperwork on the form.
Understood.
And it's so-called negative 3.
Okay.
So I believe Lisa made an original motion, and did Thomas second it?
Yeah, I seconded it.
All right, so are we going to consider that motion alive?
It's alive.
It's alive. Okay, we have a motion made by Lisa and seconded by Tama for a negative determination for file number 1124. Roll call vote, starting with Mark and Dan.
Aye.
Aye.
And Carrie and Lisa.
Aye.
Aye.
And Tama and Ron.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. The motion carries. So you will get some paperwork from the Conservation Office, and you're bound to do the project by the plan and perhaps discuss with our Conservation Director the details of reorienting the proposed shed.
Understood.
All right, well, thank you. And we're going to
Thank you very much, guys.
We're going to move on to our next item, which is
Now, do I have to stay on?
determination.
I'm sorry. Do I have to stay on?
No, you're all set, unless you're just totally enthralled with the process of this hearing.
All right.
Process.
I think I'm all set.
Your project is all set.
All right. Thank you very much, folks. Have a great night.
You bet. Determination level number 1125 is a request for determination about applicability for 47 Pine Street concerning replacing a failed septic system. And I believe Dave Oberlander is the representative for the project. How are you, Dave?
Good. How are you?
Doing well.
Yeah, it's a kind of similar to most of them that come before you. It's an existing house on Pine Street, kind of down there, Plain Street, but on the other side of the Rumford River.
Dave, you're a
Dave,
co-host, so you can show plans if you have any on your screen.
Yeah, I don't. John usually helps me out with this. My computer doesn't have a camera.
Okay, I'll put them up.
iPad. But yeah, I emailed you as the meeting was going on, but figured you're busy. Hey, there it is. Look at that. Thank you. Can you still hear me?
All right. So we can hear you. And Megan, I don't know if you can blow that up a little bit. But go ahead, Dave.
Okay, so the existing house has a cesspool and an overflow cesspool on the southeast side of the lot. That's the closest thing to the river. So we're actually making it a lot better by we're running the pipe from the house to the other side of the driveway. And the driveway is a relative high point between either side. And then we're going to put the tank in the leaching area on that side. So the only digging in the inner riparian zone would be to get the pipe over there. So a relatively shallow trench for the building sewer. The major work is on the other side of the driveway and, you know, far away from the river. We obviously couldn't get outside of the outer riparian zone, given the proximity of the river and width of the lot. But again, all the work is out of the wetlands buffer, except for the very start of the building sewer where we connect. Yeah, so other than that, it's pretty straightforward. The elevation up from the river is, I forget exactly, but I want to say we're like over 12 feet higher than the river. So, yeah, so any questions?
Yeah, just for details. Well, I just want to add some details. So this is on Pine Street where I believe it's the Rumford River crosses under Pine Street. Just before it Plain Street takes off. So it's got that complication. You can just see the Rumford River there at the bottom of the plant. And the first 100 feet is illustrated there as the inner riparian zone with the solid blue line with the dots. And I'm not sure the outer riparian zone is visible on the plan.
It's actually just north.
But that's the only complication. But it's, as you said, this is a very standard repair. The only issue is, let's see if you have illustrated sedimentation control.
Yeah, I do. There's a detail on the plan, and then we're showing the silt sock from the corner of the left rear corner of the building foundation up to the high point at the driveway.
Yeah, actually, I mentioned the wrong thing for I mentioned the water line, but on the plan, it's visible as the long blue dotted lines. But any commission members have questions about this? And
Dave, did John Thomas
if not,
the annual the flag associated with riverfront out there? I just see EDW limit. Megan, can you zoom in on the river, please? I assume John Thomas went and looked at those flags.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You kind of came over garbled a little bit, Lisa.
Oh.
Could you repeat that?
So did you? Who did the flagging? And did John review it?
I did the flagging, and I believe John reviewed it. Yes, because he reviewed the plan initially, and I got back with some comments a couple of weeks back.
Okay. Well, as long as he reviewed it.
Yeah.
And then, for some reason, my copy of this RDA is unsigned by the applicant. Megan, is there another one on file with the applicant's signature?
Typically, I'd sign them as a representative, and I've checked with DEP before, and actually, I went through this with Jennifer, and I'd say the last 20 or so I've done have always been just it's either the rep or the owner. So.
Yeah, when I stop sharing the map, I can double check.
Okay. Those are the only comments I had. Thank you.
John did leave a note on June 28th, 2022. He inspected the site, validated the resource areas per the submitted plan. So I think John, and he also had no concerns and recommended a potential negative determination after deliberation. Any further questions from members of the commission? And I think we can open it up to any audience members if they have any questions or comments. You can take your mic off mute and ask them. Otherwise, this is a straightforward project, and we can consider a motion to close. This is a request for determination of applicability.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for file DET 1125 for 47 Vine Street.
Second.
We have a motion made by Lisa, seconded by Ron. Again, we will do a roll call vote. So starting with Tama and Mark.
Aye.
Aye.
And Carrie and Lisa.
Aye.
Aye.
And Dan and Ron.
Aye.
It looks like, Dan, you have a check mark up there, so I'll throw in an aye. So the motion carries. We can consider a negative determination if somebody wants to make that motion.
I'll make a motion to issue a -3 for request for determination for DET file 1125.
Lisa makes a motion for negative determination. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think Tama got the second. So again, roll call vote starting with Tama and Mark,
Aye.
Aye.
and Dan and Carrie,
Aye.
Aye.
Lisa and Ron,
Aye.
Aye.
and I'll throw in an aye. So the motion carries for a negative determination for file number 1125, which means it's approved, assuming the project is carried out according to plan. Our next item is a notice of intent. Does not, at least on my paperwork, have a file number as of yet.
So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome, Dave. And the notice of intent involves 1 Gilbert's Way for a proposed project for the construction of a front porch and all-season room and a new deck, moving an existing pool within the 100-foot buffer zone and an area of critical environmental concern. So do we have a representative for that project?
We're here, James Fleming. Is that me?
So you are the homeowners, I'm assuming.
That's correct.
Megan, are we able to share a plan?
Yeah, I have a plan. Hold on one second. Let me see.
Hang on, I can share my screen if you want.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yep, you're co-host. You can share your screen.
Let's do the site plan first. So this is like the plan that we had done up by CS Kelly Surveyors. So it's showing the front proposed porch on the front of the house. So this kind of comes back, wraps around. So this is just outside the vernal pool, but it's still within the vegetated wetland, 100%, 100-foot buffer. And then behind it, we have an existing deck here that's kind of just rotting. So we want to remove that, build it into an all-season room, and then off that, install a new deck with the staircase going down. We have a pool that's there just for construction purposes. We wanted to get it out of the way, so we're just going to temporarily remove it, and then once the construction's done, kind of put it back. And that's kind of just what we were proposing there.
so you're saying the pool would go back exactly where it was, or it would be just a little bit to the east?
If anything, it would be further away from the vernal pool. We wouldn't want it any closer to the existing pool. And if we can
Right,
get it,
but it looks
outside
like
that,
it's-
we'll take it out.
Yeah, it looks like it's on the plan. It looks like it's right at the corner of the new deck. So that's the only reason I asked. So in my information, I don't know if we can bring up a photograph of the rear of the house where the pool and the existing deck is. I don't know if you have that in your file, but it basically would be a significant reconstruction of the.
So this is the existing back deck. Can you see the picture?
Well, we see the picture file. I don't see
There are
the
thumbnails. We
Yeah,
see
we see the-
thumbnails.
There we go. There we go. So basically, you have a structure with a stair going up to the deck that is elevated on the four. It looks like 4x4s, although they may be larger. And you're saying all of that would be removed, and the all-season room would be on the first floor, extending to the second floor, or?
It would just be the first floor. So there's you kind of see like the red umbrella there on the deck. So there's a slider here, and that would just the all-season room would basically just be same floor level. You would walk out, same dimensions of this deck, so we're going to keep that same space. And then going towards the back right of the house, that's where we'd have the new deck, kind of just for like outdoor space. And then you would have your set of stairs coming back down towards the driveway. Right now, the way it sits, it doesn't actually impact where the pool is. There's actually a few feet here from what we measured, but it does come close. We just don't want to take a chance of someone getting it. Great.
So the all-season room is going to be on the first floor or the second?
So it will be on the first floor. Here, I'll show you the.
Okay. All right.
So this is the. So this is the first floor plan here. So it kind of shows the new covered front porch that we have here. Some new stairway walking into the entryway. So existing first floor plan, it would be an open floor plan. So it actually just walks in the same elevation as our existing floors. And it just copies the layout of the existing deck. A new slider will be installed here, so they walk out to the new deck space here, and then the steps going down.
All right. So these are actually issues that are not directly under conservation, but one of the things that one of the comments that our conservation director made is that you really need to have the building inspector involved with regard to the additional footings and because this is not just a simple deck. This is kind of a structural portion of your house. So I assume you've involved the building department.
Right now, we're going through. Just want to make sure we're good with conservation, so there's no issues building within the 100-foot buffer zones. And then we have a zoning meeting this Wednesday for the variance. And once we know the variance is all set, we can wrap up the design drawings and then bring it to basically just building and permitting. See if he has any questions, comments before we go to structural drawings.
All right. So, and another comment that our conservation director made was efforts to minimize roof runoff with efforts to ensure infiltration. Has that been, and that would include dry wells, French drains. Is that something that is been considered?
Yeah, so we talked through with the architect, and we're going to be aligning MCR aluminum gutter systems. So we actually have existing drainage on the house, In all of them, we found a way to kind of just tie them into our existing drainage system. So basically, just won't be any runoff right off the roof. Everything will be gutters.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from members of the commission?
Yeah, I just have a few. If we go back to the plan view, your engineer showed a limit of sediment control or siltsot control, but it's not labeled. So I'm going to ask that you label that. And then, is there any reason it extends so far into the backyard? So if you're only going to do work around the pool, we don't really want you. You don't need that area to stage or stockpile material. You want to move that sediment control closer to the limit of work where the pool is.
Okay. I'm not sure why he made it so big. I know we talked about making sure we were covered due to the work on the front porch. And I told him I didn't have any issues putting up more. But if you think it's we should do less, we can definitely install less. We can talk to him and have him provide.
Yeah, it should be less, and you can wrap it around the pool on the south side of the house. And just he wants to put a label on it. It's unlabeled right now.
Okay.
That's fine. I think we're still waiting for a file number anyway, so you can just get us that plan for the record.
We do have a file number. We did get it. Just letting you know.
I have a question. Am I coming through?
Yes.
You're breaking up a little bit, but try your question.
Okay, my question is, the words proposed deck, right above those, there is a something slanting down to the right, down southeast, I guess. What is that? Oh, that's septic? Okay.
Yeah, septic.
Oh, so Megan, what's the file number?
1106.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think so. The request from John was to continue it. So I think asking the applicant, I mean, all of this seems very consistent with, whatever limitations there are with regard to wetlands protection. So I don't anticipate that that's going to stand in the way of your project. It obviously will be conditioned. But what we would like to do is continue the hearing till our next meeting. And let's see, our next meeting is the 25th. And it's up in the air as to whether it will be Zoom or in person at the library. So would you, and assuming there are no problems that require additional data, we can close at that time and issue an order of conditions. So is that something that would be acceptable?
We'd be good with it, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
So unless there, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was just going to make a motion, but I guess maybe you were going to open it to the audience or something.
Well, I think we already opened it to the audience, and I didn't hear anybody pipe up, and I don't see. Let's see. I don't see any hands up. Here we go. Participants list. So there are no hands up. So I think we can consider.
So moved to continue file number 25-X to the July. I'm sorry?
There's a file number. You meant 1106.
Oh, 1106. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Same meeting. Same meeting. We're just going to continue this hearing until 7:25.
to the 25th of July.
All right,
Second.
Dan made a motion for continuation of this hearing till July 25th, seconded by Lisa, and again, roll call vote, starting with Tama and Mark.
Aye.
And Dan and Carrie,
Aye.
Aye.
and Lisa and Ron.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. So I think likely the Conservation Office will be in touch with you regarding whether you need to be present for that or whether we'll just close and issue an order of conditions. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And we may
Thank you.
see you next time, but we may not.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item. I can find my agenda. Is a abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for 0 Pine Street with regard to, I believe, Kirk Bicknell as either the owner or the representative. Do we have a representative for this project?
Yes, Claire Hogebone with LEC Environmental Consultants representing the applicant.
All right, if you could go ahead and.
I'm sorry?
Your co-host, so you can share your screen if you need.
Oh, great, thank you. I will share my screen. I'm going to share the plans that were submitted along with the application. Can everybody see the plan set before them?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So again, Claire Hogebone with LEC representing the applicant and which is Brownstone Investment LLC for the ANRAD application to confirm the boundaries of bordering vegetated wetlands on 2 parcels, both identified as 0 Pine Street. And the wetland resource areas identified include bordering vegetated wetlands. We have one in the sort of northern portion of the site. You can see the north arrow directing in this direction. So sort of the northwestern portion of the site contains a bordering vegetated wetland associated with an intermittent stream that forms closer to Pine Street and flows through a culvert beneath Pine Street and continues to the south. We have a second bordering vegetated wetland in the eastern portion of the site, and that too is associated with an intermittent stream that's located off-site, again flowing south through a culvert that's located beneath Pine Street. So we delineated the wetland resource areas in, I believe it was late April of 2022. And when we filed, John Thomas took a look at the wetland resource area boundaries on June 30th. And through email correspondence, he confirms that he agreed with the wetland delineation. So no field changes were made. So the plans you see before you were the plans we submitted initially and, you know, what we're requesting approval of at this moment. So I think additional points to make is the site is mapped within an ACEC. We have the Zone 2 wellhead protection area noted, which contains the sort of eastern segment of the site. And I believe that's it. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I have no questions, but a question for Megan. Did a file number come through on this project?
No, nothing's come through yet. DEP is really backed up right now, so we're waiting for a couple file numbers.
All right. So any questions from commission members?
So yeah, I have a few, Julian.
Go ahead.
So Claire, the first thing I'm going to ask is that whoever prepared the plan labeled the respective lots. I noticed there's a dash line separating those lots. Just not clear which one. I mean,
This dashed line here.
yes.
So that dashed line separates the two lots. As I noted, there's two lots. They're both identified as 0 Pine Street, which is a little confusing, but this
right.
gray dashed line is what defines the two separate lots.
Right, but I would just take it a step further just to identify those by map and parcel. They have separate maps and parcels, right?
I see, yes. You are correct, and I believe that is noted somewhere on the plans.
Right, but not on the lots themselves.
On the lots themselves, that's a good comment, thank you.
So, I mean, unless it's in the narrative somewhere on the plan that says and is there a lot size on the other lot? I see 17.490 acres on the larger lot. Is there a lot size on the other one?
No, so since it was combined into one site for the application, I believe the surveyor just combines the acreage into one number.
But legally they're two lots, right?
I believe so at this point, correct.
So we'll want those labeled separately, map and parcel, lot acreage as two separate lots.
Okay.
So the other question I had is the intermittent stream on the wetland to the west.
This one here?
Yes. So did you flag that as it enters that culvert as it crosses under Pine Street?
I did not delineate the boundary of the intermittent stream within the wetland itself, but the culvert is identified right here.
Oh, but the thread of the stream going into the culvert on the site is that. That wasn't flagged.
It was not flagged, no. It is entirely contained within the wetland itself.
Okay. The last comment I had looking through your narrative was that you mentioned there's a potential vernal pool around flags A18 and A23, but you were not tasked with going out there. It was outside of the season. So I believe the jury's still out as to whether that qualifies as a vernal pool.
Correct.
So I don't know how we want to handle that. I'm going to defer to John Thomas that we put that it's a PDP, or do we put in the findings that that may contain a vernal pool, and that we would ask them to confirm it next season. We have to continue this either way. So I'd just like John to come up with some creative way of addressing that, so we don't lose track of it.
Yeah, I think that's fair to request, and it could be noted in the ORAD. I think you make a good suggestion that John Thomas could have something written up in the ORAD to note that there is an observed depression within the wetland, that if we come forward with a notice of intent and it's at the right time of the season, that we could share results of a survey at that point.
Okay. So just mark it on your calendar for next spring, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay. So if you could, Megan, if you can pass that info along to John Thomas about the PDP there.
Okay.
That'd be great.
All right. Go ahead, Dan.
So I was just going to say, on this plan, we just see the upper left-hand corner again with the locus. I think it's the same point, the same page. Yes, there. I get. Okay, yeah, that's yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
Any further questions from commission members? And if not, any questions from members of the audience?
You got some hands up there, Julian.
Oh, we do. Okay, I guess we'll go to somebody called Bob. If you want to take go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, yes, this is Bob Butler, live on Pine Street. I was just curious if we could discuss, if we know what's proposed for this land. I know we have two other very large areas of land by the same landowner up for development. So I just wanted to see if I noticed that the applicant is actually different for this parcel or two parcels, but it's the same landowner, and LEC is involved in this as well.
Yeah, I don't think the commission has any information on that. I don't know if the representative, Claire, you want to make any comment about that?
I don't know if I necessarily would like to make a comment at this point on it, since this is an ANRAD application and it's not for a proposed project. I would note that it is a different landowner from the other properties, or at least, you know, I know the similar landowner had the properties beforehand, but the current landowner is not the same. But I do recognize, as being a part of other projects, I don't want to dive into those with this particular filing, but I understand the concerns of a lot of the neighbors, and it's very much in my interests to do my best to keep everybody as involved as I can with our projects going forward. So if something does come to fruition, you know, I would like to find the avenues to be able to discuss that with you. I just unfortunately don't believe this is the appropriate sort of permitting avenue to be discussing that at this point.
Okay, and that's fine. I understand. But as far as the landowner, I from what I saw Germain Trust. I think that's the owner of the other parcels. So is there a new landowner for these parcels?
That is a good question. I don't know where the purchase sale has gotten to at this point with the land before us currently, but I do know the other parcels are not under that Germain Trust ownership at this point.
Yeah, and I would just comment that that's kind of outside the purview right now of conservation. We have to kind of stick to wetland issues, Wetland Protection Act issues. So I think we can presume that it's being assessed because development is being contemplated, but we have no information about that. And when that's on the table, we can discuss those fine points.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Our agenda is a matter of public record, is it not?
I believe so. Yeah, certainly.
Well, that has Kirk Pickle, does it not? As the 0 Pine Street, the party of interest. Kirk Pickle.
It does have that listed, but I don't know who that is.
Not the owner.
Okay.
The applicant, not the owner.
Okay, but it's a start. Anyway, if you're really interested, there's a.
Yeah. Okay. So there are two other people with their hands up. So if we can move on to Patty, you want to take your mic off mute and ask your question? Not getting a response from Patty, so we can put you on hold and go to Ellen, and then we'll come back to Patty. So Ellen, are you there? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hi, this is Fran Turner. I'm using Ellen's computer. 145
that's fine.
Concrete. Okay, I had a couple of questions. One of them, you mentioned the ACEC project earlier. I'm not familiar. Can you explain what that is? What that means?
It stands for area of is it
Critical environmental concern.
critical? That was the word.
Environmental concern.
And it's defined under the Wetland Protection Act. Maybe Lisa, you can help me with the criteria that defines an area of critical environmental concern.
Now, my brain's full. I think Claire could probably do it.
Thanks, Lisa.
We'll tell you, Claire, for that detail.
Right. So the area of critical environmental concern in this particular location is for the 3 Mile River watershed. And that is something that is designated by the Secretary of Environmental Affairs. And in this case, I believe it was designated in the early 2000s. And it was a result of many organizations in the state, and the Conservation Commission for Norton was involved in that, and many other conservation commissions, to request that the watershed was granted sort of additional protections and review criteria when it comes to development. So the area of critical environmental concern designation lists many sort of important features within that watershed to take into consideration for any future development, land use, things like that, and sort of allows the towns to create a sort of stewardship committee to not I don't think enforce is the right word, but just to provide more guidance into how to continue to preserve the critical features involved in an area of critical environmental concern. So,
okay. Will there be any special reviews or studies that are related to this part of this property, or in fact the other properties as well? But I know the topic is now Zero Pine Street.
From my understanding, as part of the ANRAD review, no, it's, at this point, we're just requesting the confirmation of resource area boundaries. And this is an important avenue for us to note that it is mapped within an ACEC. As far as future development, CS being located in an ACEC is taken into consideration.
Okay. But is there a particular study or if I was curious to know more about that, how would I? Is that something the Conservation Commission would take into consideration?
I can start to answer that question. Go to math.gov, ACEC program overview, or mass.gov generally, and type in ACEC.
Okay.
There are various ACECs around the Commonwealth, not just this one.
Yep.
That is a place that you might consider starting.
Okay. And I have a similar question about you mentioned wellhead protection area. Is there's also additional protections or requirements based on that in this parcel? I think it was mentioned earlier in the conversation.
Is that a zone 2, Claire?
It is a zone 2.
Yeah, that will probably be most likely play out in the planning board or zoning board regulations for potential uses that may be restricted in that zone.
Okay, so it sort of more defines what can be done and what uses for that zone. Okay.
Yes.
Actually, one last one. There was there's been some discussion of a potential Army Corps of Engineers study, and I think one of the concerns there is that I'm not that familiar with this. I'm sure the rest of you are a lot more than I am, but it sounds like there are certain minimum, I don't know if it's property sizes or conservation or wetland sizes that would trigger a study. And it seems like there's an overall this property was originally planned to be sold together. It's now being in different parcels, but the concern is that for that reason, a study may inadvertently be missed. How is that going to work, do you think? Or what is it that we would need to know, or what can you tell me about what would trigger the Army Corps of Engineers study?
I think first of all, this would depend on the size of the proposed project for development of the site. And this is not something that I think the Conservation Commission would weigh in, but in general, with a significant size development project, we ask for peer review help, and they would examine that question. So that's kind of out of our everyday assessment of projects.
Yeah, let me just say that the only time that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers would get involved in a project is if you were physically altering or filling the wetland. And then again, it's over a certain threshold for fill. There's no study per se, but the applicant would have to apply to the Army Corps for a permit if they were altering the wetlands directly.
Okay. The reason I ask is I think at one of the last planning board meetings, there was a discussion of that due to some percentage of wetlands that was intended to be filled or discussed to be filled. But it was not on Zero Pine. And so just curious how that, if that is part of the, purview of the Conservation Commission, and if that would be something that would be looked at, with several of these properties, together.
Yeah, but we can't assess that until there's an actual project presented.
Okay, that sounds good.
So maybe we can move on to some of the other. Again, the person on the computer named Patty, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, hi, this is Paul Benninger at 148 Pine Street. Just sort of building on the last question, there was a letter from LEC dated June 30th referencing Zero Pine Street. And there's a quote in the letter that says the proposed project will result in temporary and or permanent disturbances to the bordering vegetated wetlands and in the associated 100-foot buffer zone, areas protected under the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act and implementing regulations. So, and there's...
That's the next filing.
That's not associated with this filing, is it?
No.
No, and so I think you may be referring to what's labeled on ours as Balfour Farms Cluster Project, but there's no work proposed on this parcel, so I don't think there's any letter referring to this. But we will be moving on to that project soon, so maybe you can revisit that then. And,
is that this call or in a future meeting?
it's our next item on the agenda.
Thank you.
And we had another hand up, but I guess they may be moving on to the next
I
hearing.
think you answered my question.
Okay, sounds good. And now, any other questions? If not, I think certainly from the information that our conservation director submitted, he did not have any further questions, and he's recommending that we close the public hearing. So I think we can.
We can't close because we don't have a file.
Oh, okay. Yes, that was option B. Yeah. That was if there was a number available, and there isn't a number. So we need to continue until the 25th.
So I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing for 0 Pine Street, map 23, parcels 64 and 186 to the July 25th, 2022 meeting.
Second.
We have a motion made by Lisa, seconded by Dan for continuation of this hearing until July 25th. So we'll begin with a roll call vote. Carrie and Lisa.
Aye.
Tama and Dan.
Aye.
And Mark and Ron.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye, so we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to say you'll have to talk to the Conservation Office because, in fact, we may not need to see you next time if the only item is the number. But you can work that out with John.
And I know Lisa had a few comments on the plans, so we can send in the revised plans and have maybe Lisa, if you can take a look and even give us the okay, or if you can let John know your comments and he can give us the okay.
If you wouldn't mind, Claire, if you can go so far as to maybe add potential vernal pools to that in the location of where those flags are to be, TBD or something, that'd be great.
I'll add that.
Thank you.
All right, so we will now move on to our next hearing, which does seem to have a file number. It's DEP file number 250-1105. It's a notice of intent concerning a cluster development on Pine Street. And I'm assuming we have a representative of the applicant.
That would be me again, Claire Hogebone with LEC.
Welcome aboard.
All right, good to be here. With your permission, I'll share my screen to show the plan set.
I'm assuming you're a
You
co-host.
can still co-host.
Yes. Can everybody see the plan set before them?
Not quite yet, but it's, yeah, now we can.
Sure, it'll get there. All right, great. So as you noted, this is for the notice of intent application for the Balfour Farms residential cluster development project. The project includes the construction of 2 paved subdivision roadways, associated clearing, grading, utilities, and stormwater management features. We do have a wetland crossing for 1 road, and we are proposing a water main installation, which will be directionally drilled beneath a wetland. Now, I just wanted to note, this is a cluster development, so it requires a special permit with the planning board. We've been before them at 1 meeting so far, so we're doing our best to sort of concurrently present and address comments between the Conservation Commission and the planning board. So I understand Horsley and Witten is peer reviewing on behalf of the planning board and the Conservation Commission. So I just wanted to keep that note in mind as going forward. We do have planning board comments being addressed concurrently with these conservation issues. So just to jump in and give a little history of what we've been doing so far at the site, we came to the Conservation Commission last spring to get the wetland resource area boundaries approved through the ANRAD process. We had an ORAD issued on May 11th of last year. That ORAD confirmed the boundaries of bordering vegetated wetlands. We have an expansive system through the center portion of the site. We have a couple of fingers of bordering vegetated wetland that enter the sort of northwestern portion of the site. Just note the direction of the north arrow here. We have another bordering vegetated wetland in this southernmost portion of the site. And just for context, here's Pine Street running along the property boundaries here. And then we have a series of isolated vegetated wetlands throughout the site. Now, through that ANRAD review process, Jennifer Carlino, who was the agent at the time, reviewed the wetland boundaries. The 2 of us conducted a vernal pool survey and confirmed that 15 vernal pools in total were certifiable. They essentially contained the evidence of breeding activity of obligate vernal pool species, which are frogs, salamanders that only breed in vernal pools. So they are very unique areas. And all of those vernal pools are shown on the plans in these in this hatched work, and they're all contained either within the bordering vegetated wetlands or the isolated vegetated wetlands throughout the site. This site is entirely mapped within the 3 Mile River ACEC, or Area of Environmental Concern. And as such, we are proposing the wetland crossing that I mentioned earlier as a limited project to request that the Conservation Commission use their discretion in reviewing that wetland crossing, since it is located in this area of critical environmental concern. So just to remind everybody of sort of the history of how we came to the development of the project layout that we have before you, I'm going to go to sheet 5 of the plan set.
Claire,
Yes.
before you do that, just on that prior plan, just there are 2 items that I'd like you to comment on. There's a circular arc right
here.
And if you could, yes.
Let's see if I can zoom in to see if that's labeled.
I think it's labeled as I think it has to do with the well.
We have the zone 2 going across here, and I see an IWPA, perhaps?
Yes, and that I wasn't sure what it meant, and I was wondering if you were aware, and if not, maybe we can have that brought before us to define in a future hearing.
I appreciate that question, because I am also curious what the IWPA is standing for. I'm sure it's an acronym I've seen before, but I appreciate wanting to clarify that. And we do have the zone 2 wellhead protection area going across the site.
Okay.
So the IWPA is an individual, I believe it's individual wellhead protection area, so one's groundwater driven and one's surface water driven usually. So again, I think that's gonna come into zoning and uses allowed within those
Okay.
drinking water, the radiuses that are measured off of drinking water supplies.
Right. And thank you for pointing that out. I think ultimately still what I'll ask the engineer to do is to include in the side notes here a note to spell out those abbreviations so it's clear.
Because I'm assuming that those designations can possibly affect some activities of development within that site. That's why I think we need to have it clarified right up front. But I mean, if you don't have the details now, that's fine, but we can just make a note that we need to bring it out in the discussion in the future. So why don't you go move on and let's.
Sure. So just to jump down to sort of our general lot layout, we have two residential subdivision roadways. We have Germain Way here, a looped road, and we have Lloyd Circle, a longer road with a cul-de-sac. Ultimately, last fall, after we had the wetland boundaries approved, we met with Jennifer Carlino, the agent at the time, and shared a plan with her that was not this conceptual plan. It actually did not have a wetland crossing, and it had some more development located up here in upland areas. And when she first saw that, she noted how we have a lot of vernal pools here and a lot of surrounding terrestrial upland habitat, which is really important to the migration of those vernal pool species. And she requested that we consider an alternate route, to which we suggested a wetland crossing, and she was open to it. And I believe most of you were members when we came to the Conservation Commission for an informal discussion of this layout and the other layout. And I unfortunately had a conflict, so I wasn't there from LEC, but my understanding was that it was a unanimous agreement that sort of the wetland crossing was the preferred option over sort of impacting this terrestrial migration course for the important species to get to the vernal pools.
Yeah,
so,
just if I could clarify, the discussions were extremely general, and I think you can illuminate it. You have a conventional development plan that may more illustrate why we preferred this more cluster option. So if you want to just, it looks like it's under.
It is. I can definitely. I can share that. That's sort of option number 3 that none of us really want to do, because as you can see, while it expands the development, it still impacts even more of the upland areas surrounding it. It really fragments the habitat, and I can understand from a conservation perspective, from our perspective as a design team, this just was not a preferred option for many reasons. And you can see how it really fragments this landscape and doesn't allow for the open space that we are proposing along with this cluster development here. So with that, I will just jump down actually back to our sort of proposed layout here. I just wanted to sort of set the stage of, you know, I know we have a wetland crossing, and I just wanted to sort of bring us back to why we got to that. What I'm going to do briefly is discuss Germain Way, and then I'll jump over to Lloyd Circle. And I'll do my best to keep this brief, because I understand there are a lot of interested neighbors that have questions and things that they wanted to discuss. I'm sure the Conservation Commission has a lot to discuss, so I'll do my best to keep it rolling. So here we have Germain Way. We have the entrance off of Pine Street. It's affording access to 22 proposed lots. We have 4 detention basins, one right off of Pine Street. One's over here. We have another one sort of to the north of the development, and another larger one to the south of the development. This portion of the residential subdivision is limited to buffer zone alterations. So no work within this part of the subdivision is any closer than 50 feet to any wetlands. We have erosion controls depicted to minimize any erosion and sedimentation towards any wetland resource areas. And what I would like to zoom into a little bit on the plan set, I believe I mentioned this at the top of the discussion, but we are proposing some directional drilling to facilitate the installation of a water main. And so that water main is going to extend from Germain Way and make a turn and be directionally drilled beneath this wetland system. And the idea of the directional drilling is that it would go beneath the surface on one side of the wetland, cross underneath it, and then resurface on the other side. So we would essentially be avoiding any permanent or temporary impacts altogether. And we have erosion controls, and the entrance and exit points are proposed 50 feet from the wetland edge in an effort to really avoid any, issues that might come up with entering or exiting that wetland system for that directional drilling activity. I think that's all I wanted to cover on this side, unless there are any questions on the Germain Way before I hop over to the other proposed roadway. Okay, I don't see any hands yet, so I'll keep it moving. So on to Lloyd Circle. The plan sort of shifted, so keep an eye on where the north arrow is facing and the fact that we have Pine Street in the upper left corner of the plan. So we have the proposed road entering from Pine Street, and it continues up towards our wetland system here, and right here is where we have our wetland crossing. And so the wetland crossing itself, including permanent and temporary impacts, is going to be 4,670 square feet. So we are remaining under the 5,000 square foot threshold for BVW impacts under the Act. Permanent impacts are going to be 4,146 square feet. So the remaining, I believe it's 500 square feet and change, is accounting for the temporary impacts for construction to build that crossing. And the crossing itself was designed with vertical retaining walls in an effort to minimize the amount of impact to the wetlands. So the alternative would be grading at a more gradual slope, which would have resulted in a lot more wetland impact. So the vertical retaining walls is an effort to minimize that impact there. We have 5 stormwater basins also along the development here. Again, similar to the other side, the stormwater basins and associated grading are no closer than 50 feet to the wetlands. And we have erosion controls proposed along all of that work as well to protect the wetlands from any erosion or sedimentation that could occur. The crossing is going to provide access to 8 lots here. And in an effort to mitigate for the permanent alterations to the wetland for the wetland crossing here, we have proposed wetland replication occurring over here along the G series wetland. So what I'm going to do is just jump to sheet 21 to go over the wetland replication, or yes, sheet 20, very briefly to go over the wetland replication. And so as you can see, we're sort of in that corner where we have the proposed stormwater basin, and we have a long stretch of wetland replication proposed. The replication area is a little over 6,000 square feet. So all in all, it's about a 1.45 ratio of the proposed replication to the permanent alteration. So that essentially will mitigate for our permanent alterations for the crossing. Any temporary alterations associated with the construction will be restored in place. We are proposing LEC to be on site for any of the activities that are occurring at the wetland crossing to ensure the protection of resource areas there. And we will continue monitoring not only the wetland replication area after the construction of it, which we would oversee as well. We will monitor the buffer zone plantings that are restoring any buffer zones. We'll monitor the restored portions of the wetland from the crossing as well.
I
hear a question maybe coming in.
Dan?
Yes, I'm having a little trouble hearing, but do I understand correctly that there will be a 40% increase in wetland when this project is done?
I think that sounds correct. That's ultimately the ratio that we're going with. We are impacting permanently 4,146 square feet of wetland, and we are creating 6,020 square feet. So yes,
Okay,
I think a 45% increase of wetland, that sounds like a correct assessment.
Just a note that you may want to take into consideration is we have had discussions in the past about the true effectiveness of a replicated wetland. So we haven't generally, in other words, they don't necessarily always function identically. So I personally, and I think other commission members will potentially agree, am not necessarily in favor of installing a larger percentage because it's never really clear that it's going to be a permanent wetland area. So particularly if you're disrupting potential old growth upland trees and so on. So you may want to look at the site. I mean, other commission members can weigh in, but there's not necessarily an advantage to disrupting more upland to create what you're going to call a wetland that may not actually truly function as a wetland in the long term. So just a point of consideration.
No, I think that is a good point. I've been in many situations before where, you know, we're choosing where to put a wetland replication area, and you have these beautiful, as you say, like old growth upland areas that, why would I disturb that to create a wetland when it's functioning really great as this upland habitat? I will say that in some cases, creating more wetland area does sort of account for possible areas of it not functioning as exactly intended. So sort of increasing, I know the Wetlands Protection Act requires a 1-to-1 ratio. When you're increasing the wetland restoration area a bit more than that, you sort of account for a bit of room of error, or even, you know, the day of changes that you might make in the field to account for grading, or, you know, we might be proposing 1.45 and we get out to the field and we say, man, there's a couple really great, beautiful, large trees that we want to preserve, and that area gets a bit smaller. So I do see where you're coming from, Chairman. So I think that's something we would definitely take into consideration during construction, and bringing John Thomas in to help us, you know, review those kinds of site conditions during construction.
All right, so if that covers all of your main points, I think there may be more questions among the commission, and certainly I suspect attendees to the hearing will have some questions.
Yes, I could go on for a long time, so I'm happy to yield my time to all the questions that are going to come.
So if you have questions, you can press the raise the hand button, and I see a computer named Bob got there first, so why don't you go ahead with your question?
Julie, do you mind taking the commission's comments first, and maybe Janet?
Oh, yeah, I thought we had gone over that, so certainly go ahead.
Oh no, we're just starting. I had a couple pages, Julian, you know me.
Well, I do, but this is not the first hearing that's going to happen with this, so.
Right, but I want to get this in for the record so LEC can address these, and I'm sure first thing written wants to be sent. So I'm going to start with the vernal pools. Are those going to be certified at some point?
They had been. I'm a little surprised that they're not showing up on Mass Mapper. I submitted them last year during the ANRAD review, and I even submitted a vernal pool report with our Heritage Hub submittals, and they were accepted. So I'm not certain why that's lost in translation and how it's depicted on Mass Mapper, but we're essentially treating them as certified.
Okay, so they haven't been assigned numbers yet?
No.
Okay, so instead of just identifying them by cross-hatching, I will be looking for those to be identified by the certified vernal pool numbers. So I'm just going to throw out general comments. I'm not looking for the solution tonight because this is just a start, right? In terms of the wetland replication area, I do not think it's a good idea to defer how that's going to be constructed or the size of it to construction. I think every square inch of this property should be reviewed for the optimum place to put it. And that is taking into consideration no mature tree removal for the sake of the wetland replication. So will the open space be open to the public or just the residents of this community?
That is a good question, and that's been coming up in our planning board reviews too. So it's ultimately up to the town if they want to take that open space or not. And if they don't, it would end up in the ownership of the HOA of the development.
Okay. So that said, if we could go back to the layout plan.
Sure.
We did not do, as a commission, a great job with Arrowhead, which is notifying the public of how to access, where to access, and where to park, if it is indeed going to be open to the public, because people have now started to infringe upon the easements that allow you to access the Canoe River, for instance. It looks like somebody's side yard, so you're trespassing. It's not a comfortable thing. So I would ask that signage be put up, split rail fencing, you name it, to direct the public to the fact that they have rights to traverse in between those houses at some point.
I think that's
that space.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. I think the project team is just waiting on the town's decision for that in case the town had input on how they want to handle that.
Okay. So the next thing is the engineer that did these plans has either got to hire assessor or CPES, because everything they wrote is obsolete, and we're talking 20 years ago, 30-day time frames for inspection. So that entire series of notes and details has to be bombed out to meet the 2022 CGP. It's just obsolete.
Can you point out what page is that on?
It's any note that has to do with erosion prevention and sediment control.
Erosion, okay.
Yep. So, so the other thing is, I don't know if you've developed a SWIP yet, but this is going to require phased construction. So just ringing it with sediment fence is not going to cut it. So we need phasing plans to see when, which portion of the project is going to be constructed. Are you going to be constructing temporary basins, sediment traps? How are you going to manage stormwater runoff during construction? I understand it's going to be part of the SWIP, so we'll be looking for that. And hopefully, of course, later can peer review that, because God knows I don't have time. So if you can just keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
The HDD looks like it's going off into space owned by other property. I can't even tell where it's ending. Can we go to that plan for a second?
Where you want me to go?
HDD, drilling for the water line.
Oh, yes. That, I believe, was more detailed on 17.
So how is that still on the property? I can't tell.
So it is going to be in the open space. Actually, let me just zoom out a little bit. So the, let's see, sort of the thicker dark lines here is going to be the lot lines. And then this area where my cursor is over is actually a part of the open space, and it's going to allow access from Germain Way to the open space. And you can kind of see there's footpaths here. So it's essentially trying to allow continued public access to the open space and make it easier for the folks that move into the residential development to get there. But that directional drilling is going to exit Germain Way through that And I believe, depending if the town takes it, if the HOA keeps it, there's likely going to be some sort of easement created to allow, future access to be able to maintain that and all that. So it kind of takes its turn, crosses the wetland here and re-enters, and you can kind of see this dark solid line again, and that's the corner of a lot that's on Lloyd's Circle. So it enters back into Lloyd's Circle.
So I'm seeing a couple things that are not clear on this at all, and I have no idea how the contractor is going to build from this. So first of all, there's going to be access to the pit on the other side, and there should be a separate plan showing the bore in its entirety, and ask the contractor to provide a frack out contingency plan, and that will be part of the order of conditions. But right now, that was not a great place to put there isn't even no match line, so I want to see that on one whole sheet of paper to see how the contractor can access it, that exit pit or entry pit, on whatever side that is on the right side. So
you're just looking for like a detail sheet on the directional drilling?
Yes, the pit.
Okay.
I don't know if you're going to have the pit sizes. You should, depending on the depth and the angle of the pipe. But we definitely need more detail on that. I think Horsley Witten had the same question I did about the 24-inch. Now we're going to go to the culvert, the crossing.
Mm-hmm.
How that 24-inch is sized, because I've seen many of these in my day where the water is just not conveyed with a simple pipe under a wetland.
Mm-hmm.
It's not dispersed through the wetland. It should be open. That's my first comment. Second,
okay, so you just want to see sort of like the work behind why 24 inches was determined. Okay.
The next thing is, let's go to the 4,700 and something square feet. Sounds like that was based on a temporary impact of 3 feet, which I think is extremely impractical to build a wall. So if you're going to get equipment back there, it's probably at least 6 to 8 feet. So I think you're going to have to revisit your temporary impact numbers to represent a realistic workspace, if indeed that's what it was based on. And I think you're going to go over 5,000. That said, I'm just curious as to why you invoked limited project status for several reasons. One is you typically only invoke it if you're going over 5,000 and you don't meet performance standards for the crossing. Two is, if we can go back to the layout plan, you mentioned in your narrative many times that there's no other access. So, you invoke limited project status when there's no other way to reach the upland. I'm seeing one from Briggs. I'm seeing a clear path from Briggs to avoid that wetland crossing. So if you could, I know you got into the hows and the whys, but that's why I'm not really seeing this limited project approval, because there is definitely another way to accommodate that access without crossing the wetland.
Well, so we mentioned the Briggs Street option when we discuss the limited project provisions at the end of our report, and that is where an entry from Briggs Street, potentially going in this direction, essentially cuts this certified vernal pool out from any migratory paths. So it does, a Briggs Street entrance would still fragment some of these vernal pools.
We're mixing parts of the regulations now, because it should be that you have no other access except through the wetland, and I'm not seeing it. So it exists, right? So I just think you better look at the definition of that limited project and how it applies.
Okay.
Because if another access exists, you cannot claim limited project status. Okay. What else? All right, we talked about the wall. Okay, I think I'm done for tonight.
I think you might have spelled forest on this page. A little farther down. Has the mixes of the grasses and forest mix or something like that. Anyway, just thought I'd point that out.
I think I have one other comment for you about the potential wildlife habitat assessment. So if we are going to look at possibly not fragmenting versus crossing, you need to give us a better alternatives analysis, and weigh that against the functions and values of that wildlife habitat in that area. So I will ask you for that. Because now you're starting to weigh the pros and the cons of the alternate access. Sorry, now I'm done.
All right, other commission members have questions? If not, we can move on to the people that have their hands up. And I think from the computer named Bob, if you want to take your phone off mute and ask your question, identify yourself, please.
Sure. This is Bob Butler, 133 Pine Street. I see that the peer reviewer would like to speak, so if she'd like to go first, I'm fine with that. Is that Janet Bernardo?
Yeah, and maybe that would be the most efficient way to go. Janet, why don't you go ahead and make your comments and questions, etc.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Janet Bernardo. I'm a professional civil engineer with the Horsley Witten Group. With me is Amy Ball. She is a professional wetland scientist. So I have reviewed the stormwater aspect of this project. Amy has reviewed the wetlands portion of this project. So as a quick rundown, we also were reviewing this on behalf of the planning board, and we presented our review of the zoning criteria and the subdivision layout, as well as stormwater to the planning board. But I will review it kind of quickly for you guys. I'm happy to answer any questions about the stormwater, but I think Amy's participation on the wetlands is maybe more critical for this board, so I don't want to take up too much of your time on stormwater. But the applicant is required to meet the Mass Stormwater Handbook as well as the local regulations, which require, there's the MS4 permit requirements that they will also need to meet. So the Mass DEP Stormwater Standards is 10 standards. So we provided a letter to the planning board dated June 1st, 2022 that has 10 standards listed. And I believe this board received a copy of that letter. I think you were CC'd at the end of it, so hopefully you have that. And there's a wetland review letter that was issued today that Amy will talk about. But standard 1 requires that the applicant does not cause any erosion to a wetland. Any water going towards a wetland needs to be treated and cannot cause erosion. And after reviewing all of the various design points and the discharge points to wetland areas, we do believe that the applicant has met that standard, and they're basically proposing a number of large infiltration basins, surface basins, and which does require a waiver from the planning board to have the surface basins, which they've requested. But an infiltration basin basically is a large depression that the water will be discharged in after kind of going through a forebay area that removes sediment, and then the water works itself back into the aquifer as far as the zone 2 and the interim wellhead protection areas. That is the stuff that the stormwater design is kind of concerned about. So, but as far as standard 1, they meet standard 1. Standard 2 means that they are not allowed to increase the peak flow of wetland going to any of these different design points, any point off the property specifically, or to a wetland system. So we have, that involves a number of various calculations. We have provided some, a number of discussion points that are kind of technical that the applicant will be able to respond to. There, some minor discrepancies and adding some spot grades and giving us a little bit more detail on some of the items. in general, it was a reasonable design. There is a isolated vegetated wetland that is not a vernal pool. That is one of the discharge, it kind of becomes one of the discharge points. It's kind of near parcel A, I believe. And that isolated vegetated wetland the runoff and the volume of water in that wetland will increase. However, because it's not a vernal pool and it's not on another property, that is an acceptable way to manage. They are not overflowing it, but it will have more water in it after a rain event. So just to be clear about that one. The applicant has provided a table that kind of shows all of the different infiltration basins. I don't know if you can click on the drawing that has those basins. Maybe it's a drainage plan, just to be able to see them all over the place. They're quite spread out. Oh, they're on two different sheets. You don't have an overall, but this is there's 1, 2, 3, 4
here, 2, 3, 4. So this is Germain Way. Did you want Germain or the other one?
Oh yeah, both of them. So you can see there's 4 on Germain Way, and then on the other one, there's a number. There's 9 altogether, maybe.
There are 9 altogether. You're right.
Yeah, and there's a number of swales that are basically depressions that are directing runoff behind some of the property lines, back to the rear of the properties, so directing the runoff from the houses to the different stormwater basins. So we have kind of conducted a full review of all of their calculations, and we gave a number of comments that none being particularly showstoppers. They're just needing to be dealt with a little bit. Standard 3 has to do with recharge. The applicant is required to recharge a significant amount of stormwater, and that is associated with the amount of impervious area that they have added to this property. It is considered a new development, obviously. And so they need to recharge a lot of water, but because they have all these infiltration basins and the soil is good soil, they are able to meet that standard relatively easily. Standard 4 has to do with managing the total suspended solids, which is basically when you have sand and salt and leaves and debris that land on the roads, go into the catch basins, and then come out the other end of the pipe. They kind of get deposited into the forebays, and that needs to get collected. The idea of the forebay is that it collects the sediment, and then the cleaner water goes into the larger basin system and then can infiltrate clean water back into the aquifer, into the ground. We had a few comments regarding the total suspended solid TSS removal rates, as well as the removal of phosphorus, which is one of the requirements of the EPA MS4 construction general permit that is applicable to this project. So they will need to show us the calculations for removing phosphorus. Infiltration basins is one of those, is one of the methods that does remove phosphorus relatively well. So we've asked for the calculation, but we're not expecting that to be a difficult ask. Standard 5 has to do with land uses of higher potential pollutant loads. So it's a residential subdivision that does not qualify as a LUPL, as we call it. And it would be more like a gas station or a junkyard that is considered a LUPL. So the land use with higher potential pollutant loads is not applicable for standard 5. Standard 6 really has to do with the critical areas, discharging to critical areas, which is the zone 2. The interim wellhead protection area, which is the IWPA, and they are discharging to a critical area, meaning that they have to have a specific types of practices. They similar to the infiltration basins, with the forebays having catch basins prior to that will collect some of the leaves and the debris, and we want them because if it was a LUPO, we'd be more concerned because it's a clean water going into a critical area. We want to replenish that aquifer. So they have certain criteria that they need to meet, and we want to make sure that they've clearly documented that they do comply with Standard 6. Again, it's a documentation process that we expect that they will be able to meet. Standard 7 has to do with redevelopment, and so it's not applicable to this project. Standard 8 has to do with the erosion control, and we have a number of comments regarding what they should be showing as far as with the SWIP and making sure that they're meeting the erosion controls, providing some significant robust protection to protect the wetlands. Standard 9 has to do with operation and maintenance and exactly who will be maintaining this, if it's a homeowners association or it's a town of Norton. It will need to be clear and making sure that anyone that's involved, so assuming if it's a homeowner association, that the infiltration basins are maintained on a regular basis so that they can have a long lifespan. The 4 bays will need to be cleaned regularly, and the catch basins also should be cleaned regularly. So that will be something that we want to make sure they have a clear image of. So it's a very simple plan that shows where everything is, as well as understanding who the responsible party is in the long run. And Standard 10 has to do with an illicit discharge statement, which is basically the property owner saying that they understand that they cannot discharge illicit discharge similar to septic systems or washing machines. You can't just discharge anything besides stormwater into the systems. And so it's information for the property owner to sign off on so that they understand that that's one of their criteria. So we have provided a letter. We're expecting the applicant to be able to respond to the stormwater pieces as well as some of the other comments we gave to the planning board. But I'm going to pass it over to Amy Ball to talk about the wetland impacts, particularly I think the crossing, which is an important part. But feel free to ask me any questions regarding the stormwater. That works.
Janet, was there any consideration given to lid?
Low impact development, well, infiltration basins are, I mean, they've separated them out, and they have, because they have 9 different basins, if they had one gigantic basin in the middle, I wouldn't consider that a low impact development, but they have separated them out. We have made some suggestions to the planning board as well as, making, having only one sidewalk and possibly reducing the roadway width. There is a very long roadway going to the cul-de-sac. It's a pretty lengthy road.
So the other one, the one of them.
Lloyd is relatively long, and trying to maybe put a permeable area inside the cul-de-sac. But that is kind of where our low impact development comes from, narrowing roads and separating out the stormwater as much as possible.
And to just look at any provisions for rain gardens and things like that, or do you think they've just met it through the introduction of all those infiltration basins?
Well, they've managed their stormwater through all those infiltration basins. We are certainly a big fan of rain gardens and fire retention areas. And if we tend to look at what the design is and make sure that it meets the criteria. I would definitely encourage fire retention or gravel wetland systems. Infiltration basins are certainly easy and simple to, relatively easy to maintain over a long term, to be able to see that if there's any, you have that 4-bay to see if any sediment is filling up. And you can see if it's not working, if it starts to fill up with water and doesn't infiltrate. It's an easy thing to look at.
Thank you.
Are you ready for Amy
So
to?
if there are no further, Yeah, if there are no further questions about stormwater, we can move on to Amy. So Amy, why don't you go ahead?
That's good. Thank you. For the record, Amy Ball, senior ecologist with the Horsey Working Group. Our comments from regarding the wetlands are predicated on one rather substantial factor, and that the proposed project and the wetland crossing is located within a 3 Mile River ACEC. There is a strict reading prohibition of any wetland alteration within an ACEC. That's something we pointed out both in our letter to the Conservation Commission and to CDA. I will preface this by saying that the applicant has requested limited project status, as Commissioner Cardoza had pointed out, and I believe the reason the applicant has opted to pursue this as a limited project is due to the wetland crossing in an ACEC. However, I'd like to point out that the regulations are fairly strict on BVW alteration in an ACEC, and it provides for only a few discrete allowances in that situation. It does not allow for the wetland replication. It sort of supersedes that section. It also doesn't allow for the work, or it would allow for the work if the presumption of significance of the BVW were overcome. I don't believe they're seeking to do that here. But it shall not apply to work proposed specifically under the limited project provision at 310 CMR 1053-3L. And I emphasize that because that particular provision is the only one that's called out for allowing BVW alteration in an ACEC. The provision that the applicant has proposed this under is for the limited crossing under 1053-3E. And that's something that I think that the applicant needs to further explore. There had been some notes within the LEC's project narrative noting that there had been another crossing someplace in Southeast Mass, at least in the DEP Southeast region, that allowed for this. But I think that that's sort of a big factor for the commission to consider. The 1053-3L provision that allows for this limited ability to alter wetlands in an ACEC is specifically for water-dependent projects, and those are defined in the regulations. And I don't believe that this project would necessarily meet that definition. So we believe, our first and foremost comment regarding the wetland alteration here in the 10 Mile River ACC is that there needs to be some further clarification on how this subdivision would meet that standard. I don't know whether I should pause there and see if there are any questions, because that's kind of a big comment, or I can just go through the rest of our comments and we can cover them all together.
Well, are there any questions about what has been presented so far? If not, we can continue. I think go ahead with the rest of your comments.
Okay. So the second comment, or next several comments are regarding the proposed mitigation. And Commissioner Curtis also touched upon this briefly. The applicant is preparing a wetland replication plan for about a 6,000 square foot replication area, which provides for greater than 1-to-1 mitigation ratio. And hearing the explanation for the larger replication area does have some merits, as Ms. Wiesenberg had pointed out. We would like to see some additional details presented on the wetland replication plan itself. It's good that it's shown on the plan sheets, but we believe that the discussion should also demonstrate that it is definitely following the Massachusetts Inland Wetland Replication Guidelines that DEP has put out, and there may or any newer guidance that DEP may or may not update anytime soon. And specifically, we'd like to understand better how the proposed wetland hydrology will be achieved, and suggest that perhaps monitoring wells may be important to be incorporated in the wetland replication area. And there should also be a plan for addressing any invasive species that may occur within the wetland replication area. Again, as pointed out by Commissioner Cruz, that we had questioned how the sizing of the culvert was designed. There's a 24-inch equalizer culvert beneath the crossing. Just sort of from a strict look at an aerial photograph and look at the sort of long linear configuration of the wetland area in the location where it is being crossed, we questioned whether or not there may be an intermittent stream in there, and whether, in fact, the Massachusetts stream crossing standards may apply here, and whether maybe a more substantial design, such as a bridge or a span of the entire wetland area, may be in order. And then finally, with respect to the wetland crossing, the Commission, as you may be aware, has the discretion to seek a wildlife habitat evaluation for the proposed crossing. That's true of any wetland alteration or BVW alteration when proposed. With respect to the 8-inch ductile water line, we had simply recommended that the applicant clarify the potential for maintenance of vegetation in the buffer zone, if it needs to be cleared of trees or woody vegetation, and if so, could the applicant provide a description of the maintenance activities? Then the other couple of comments we had were with respect to additional permitting. I don't know whether, and I apologize, I came in late, I was in another hearing. But there is some additional permitting that would have to happen with the design as proposed. Any wetland alteration within BVW alteration within a subdivision would also necessitate a Section 401 water quality search. And as a result of needing an additional state issued permit, there may be a need for a NEPA review on the project. And we're recommending that the applicant at a minimum include the Conservation Commission and other wetland related or environmental related permits, applications, and permits or certificates as may be issued. The Mass DEP has also made some comments. We're recommending, I won't read them, they're pretty long, but we're recommending that the applicant provide a response to the DEP comments, and these are specific to the wetland crossing and habitat. And then finally, we were forwarded all of the comments from the abutters. There were quite a few. And while this is the first hearing from conservation, and I know that the project is also undergoing review with the planning board, a number of the comments we noticed had also commented upon an additional development across Pine Street that is owned by the same development, the developer, and are seeking to know whether this proposed subdivision is part of a larger plan that may be there's a phase 1 or a phase 2 of this project, in which case we believe that that could be construed as project segmentation. From a regulatory perspective, that's generally not acceptable, and particularly where additional wetland alteration would be proposed. So those are our sort of big picture wetland comments that we had both for planning board and for conservation. But I can turn it back over to the commission for comments.
Can we just have the key sheet to see where those, I'm sorry, and you talking about the prior ANRAD that was just in front of us, that's like.
And I think I missed that hearing, but that may be.
Okay, so it's to the west, I think. Can somebody scroll to the key sheet? Because I think it shows that other lot that was just before us tonight. I just want to get a sense of the segmentation.
If I can just note that
that's right
this
there,
is the lot that was previously before us for an ANRAD that has no connection ownership wise or applicant wise to the one we're talking about now. I think what folks are bringing up are these 3 lots across the street that had the same applicant for the ANRAD as this. So I just want to note, you know, this lot over here is under a different applicant.
What's the status of the ones across the street? Those haven't been before us, right?
Just for an ANRAD.
Okay.
We got an ANRAD review for this over last winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, if I could just make a quick comment before anyone else says, I would say this has a long way to go before at least I would vote for. This is especially it's in the ACEC and it's anyway. So maybe we'll want to comment.
Yeah, I think before we continue this, we need to give people that are participating tonight an opportunity to just ask the question and maybe focus their question if it doesn't directly relate to the Wetlands Protection Act. But I think if we're all set with the Horsley and Witten presentations, and Claire, I don't know if you want to comment on any specific thing that was said or it will be addressed later, but if not, do you have any comments at this time, Claire, or
no, I understand there's a lot of neighbors that would like to speak, and I'm sure we'll be addressing the Horsley and Witten comments in writing. So I'm, happy to let the neighbors take it and the abutters have their chance to speak.
All right. So I think, Bob, you had your hand up first, and why don't you go ahead and shoot with your question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've got some pre-written comments and concerns. So some of these were kind of brought up already in the ANRAD and this topic. So hopefully I don't replicate it too much, but it's probably just easier if I go through. And I'll just pause after each paragraph. I just have 6 or 7 short paragraphs. I just have some concerns. The first is that this notice of intent is being looked at as a complete project when it is only one part of a larger project on Pine Street. This notice of intent only shows 136 acres on the east side of Pine Street. Same landowner also purchased another 51 acres on the west side of Pine Street. And I had written they had another 18 acres on the east side of Pine Street, and that was what I presumed was the same developer. So I'm not really sure on that 18 acres what the story is, but I had included that all as a total of 205 acres on Pine Street being potentially developed. So again, this impacts the calculations of the DVW alteration within ACEC, the 3 Mile River watershed. As the applicant has stated to Pine Street abutters that they would like to build 20 more homes on the parcels on the west side of Pine Street. Looking at the ANRAD for these parcels, I don't see there's any way you could build 20 homes unless you impacted the BBWs on that side of Pine Street, the way that they're shaped. So I have concern that the applicant is doing this to kind of avoid possibly having the Army Corps of Engineers involved. So I just will stop there and see if there's any comments. Okay.
I can't address that. I don't see any hands up, but go ahead.
Okay. So there's also noted in the last planning board meeting, there's a discrepancy on the total acreage in the parcels that are in this notice of intent. The applicant is claiming it to be 105 acres, and I spoke with Paul Di Giuseppe, I hope. He had concurred that it should be 136 acres, and that's what's shown on the assessor maps. So he said that he would ask the peer reviewer to update that. So the reason I bring that up is because of the open space calculation. The applicant has said that there's 53.4 acres to be set aside for open space. However, they have not said how much of that is non-wetlands, because the bylaw for cluster subdivision states that the open space must be 35% of the acreage, not including wetlands, ponds, marshes, or other protected natural area.
So if I could just address that to Claire, this sounds like a key issue to be resolved. So can we be sure to see exactly why that discrepancy has come up?
Yes, I can definitely ask the engineer to take a look at those numbers and provide the calculation of upland versus wetland in the open space. I just put that in my notes.
Okay, thank you. I also looked at the mass habitat of rare species map reference in the notice of intent. I didn't see anything for the parcels in this notice of intent, but there's a large priority habitat of rare species taking up a portion of the land on the parcels. This same developer is planning on developing on the west side of Pine Street. So this rare species habitat also butts the brook, which is running through the parcels in this notice of intent. Just want to bring that up. I'm not sure if this is really for the Conservation Commission. I might bring this up with the Planning Board, but since we have not seen the development plan for the land on the west side of Pine Street, and given the importance of the confluence of the Rumford wading rivers into the 3 Mile River, its surrounding wetlands in an ACEC, wildlife, including a priority rare habitat, and a Native American historical site, which is called Lockety Neck Fight. Do you think there's a possibility that the Norton Land Preservation Society could acquire that land and keep it for river, wetland, wildlife, historical preservation?
Yeah, that's kind of outside of conservation, and I'm assuming that land is fairly pricey, which always makes it very difficult for these organizations.
I'm just thinking if there's concessions being made for the wetlands on the one side of of Pine Street on the east side, do we necessarily want to give them more concessions on the west side, or do we make it so that it's better utilized?
Yeah, I don't know if I would characterize these as concessions. See, the way the Wetland Protection Act is constructed, there are certain criteria by which you can develop a site adjacent to wetlands, and if through engineering you meet those criteria, it's not something we can deny. It's if it's consistent with the criteria of the Wetland Protection Act, it's something that we have to approve. And of course, if there's a dispute and we deny it, it becomes appealed to I guess it's EPA or DEP. Is that the, Lisa, was that the correct designation? DEP.
Yeah.
So, and then if we don't make a clear determination, DEP just says, well, okay, it's approved. So those are the bounds with which we have to make decisions. And I understand in planning, I think there is more individual discretion within a town than with conservation administering the Wetland Protection Act. But go ahead with your next question.
Okay. So the applicant at the 6/28 planning board meeting agreed to the environmental impact statement being done. However, the peer reviewer, Horsley Witten, also stated the Conservation Commission has the discretion to require a wildlife habitat evaluation in regards to the wetland crossing of the DVW with a white circle. And also, I think Amy also brought up the peer reviews. She mentioned that the possible need of a bridge spanning the entire wetland area.
And I think that issue still needs to be resolved as to what the...
Yeah. I understand. Okay. In addition to the wetland crossing, the applicant had proposed a 8-inch water main that's designed to loop between the two roadways using directional drilling under BVW. I believe this was mentioned that this could require additional wetlands permitting beyond this notice of intent.
There's no permitting per se, but they really need to provide additional details on how that's going to be constructed. And then we typically ask the contractor to provide what we call a frac out plan, which is a frac contingency plan, because sometimes the method can breach the surface. So the contract, it's like an emergency plan. The contractor has to make provisions for if something goes wrong during that drilling beneath the wetland. So,
okay.
Yeah, so we will be looking for additional details from the engineer on the setup of that, and then a deliverable by the contractor.
Okay, great. I had a question on the map on that proposed water main. It looked like where it was taking after it left Germain Way, it kind of takes a hard right turn, and I don't know what that is. Little circle area is that just a depression where that makes that turn? It's not like a vernal pool, I would think, if it's that close, right?
No, that's actually a hill. So you see
a hill, okay.
Yeah, that 100 there is the elevation, and then you see over here where my cursor is 85. So it elevates
okay,
up
I couldn't
to
see those
a higher
numbers.
elevation.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Of course.
I just have one last comment regarding the stormwater. So this is a personal concern for me because I'm on the west side of Pine Street and across from Germain Way on a lower elevation from Germain Way. And I have a constant stream behind my house that's fed by the storm and groundwater that comes from the east side of Pine Street near the proposed Germain Way. So I think this might have actually been mentioned in the ANRAD prior to this, where there's a culvert that runs across Pine Street or under Pine Street. I think it was referred to as an intermittent stream. However, I have the stream behind me. It's still flowing. It's, July and we're in a moderate drought and there's still water flowing through there. So I'm not really sure what constitutes intermittent stream.
I think I could actually point to that a little bit through a figure that I haven't shared yet, but it's in our notice of intent application. So this is the USGS topographic map. It's a figure 1 in our application. And a perennial stream is depicted on this map as a solid blue line. So you kind of see the solid thick blue line. You see the Wading River. Those are perennial streams or perennial rivers. So I think what you might be looking at, it sounds like your house is probably somewhere here along Pine Street in relation to the site.
Yeah, it's down a little bit to your right.
Sort of across the street from, okay. Yep. And so typically a perennial stream is identified on this map as the solid blue line, and intermittent streams are either not identified at all or they're identified by thin blue lines, which is kind of
So
difficult
there's
to tell.
actually a pond that's there, year round. So I'm not really sure why this doesn't show the pond at all. If you looked at aerial photographs, you would see how much water is actually there.
And I know what I'm saying, it's not really, cut and dry. It is just sort of step one of what we look at with that. So even though this is only showing like a wet area in the map, there very well could be a pond there if you show up.
Yeah, so that pond is
where
actually,
you're coming from.
the pond actually goes into a dam, and that pond is also fed by between 142 and 148 Pine Street. There's like a brook running through there. So that runs into this same pond, and then at that end of that pond there's a dam behind 141 Pine Street. And from there, I believe it goes down into the 3 Mile River. I'm not really sure who's in control of this dam, so I don't know if that's something we need to look at.
Claire, if you click on figure 3, can you turn on, I'm sorry. I think that's the area it'll show that pond. You can clearly.
I think figure 3 might be the FEMA, so that might be a little tougher, but here's figure 2.
Yeah, you can see it. You can actually see it across the street there.
I think this is the pond you're talking about that has the dam structure somewhere around here.
Right, and my house is up, about 4 houses up from there. So the next one down.
This one here?
Yeah, right there, yeah.
Okay.
So that water is coming, across Pine Street, under Pine Street, and then through this little brook here, or stream, whatever you want to call it, into this pond. And then, like I said, that's where that other brook from across the street is also feeding into.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know if Janet is still on the line, but Janet may be able to address that in terms of them meeting the stormwater standards with the peak discharge rates offsite.
Sorry, say that, ask that again? Or wait, were you asking that of me or Janet?
Oh, Janet, sorry.
Sorry.
To be able to answer that question about, sending additional water to an offsite location.
Yes, the applicant is required to either reduce or they cannot exceed the existing flow offsite at any point off their property. And that they have a small basin, I think the smallest one is up at the front to capture that runoff, right? I think there's a parcel A maybe that you've labeled it as.
Oh, right.
A lot one. Isn't one of these basin in lot 1, is there a basin?
Yes. This one here, right next to Pine Street?
Yeah. So that will capture, that will take some of the runoff, and they have to show that they cannot increase the runoff offsite to that point, to where you are. Does it help?
Okay. Yeah, I'm just worried about the water table just because our sump pump runs in the springtime.
No, that's a good question. I would kind of be interested to understand the distance that potential perennial stream is from Pine Street if it's more than 200 feet. That is a requirement. If it's a perennial stream, they have a 200-foot riverfront area.
Buffer?
It's not exactly a buffer, it's the riverfront area that they cannot increase. And there's more regulations. It's a wetland resource area if it's within 200 feet of the riverbank.
So I guess the question is for Claire, if that perennial stream casts a 200 foot this far up, right?
And the perennial stream we've been talking about is which one in relation to?
It looks different on this than it does on that aerial that you have.
Yeah, it definitely does. It looks
doesn't show anything on this.
Yeah.
Right. So here, like we have this pond on our site, and I guess your question is this feature, is that functioning as a perennial stream?
Right.
We can look into that.
Yeah, all right. So Bob, we're going to have more hearings on this, and so
that's all I have, anyways. Thank you, appreciate it.
all right.
Thank
And there are
you.
other people waiting for questions, so we want to give them a chance.
Sure.
So thank you for your questions. And I think next up is Brad Jones, if you want to, or at least the computer labeled Brad Jones. So if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Howdy. Oh, this is getting me in trouble. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you clear.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to be quick. I think actually Horsley and Winton covered this a little bit. It's gratifying to hear there's legislation on it. Just I was going to bring up the multiple projects on Pine Street, and since we are adjacent to the area with the Wading River and the 3 Mile River, I would just like to ask just to consider everything carefully. I know you can't really add studies beyond the purview of the Wetland Protection Act, but just to really consider all of that carefully, since I see no reason why the wetlands on the east side of the Pine Street would be any different in terms of the amount of endangered of habitats that might contain endangered or critically threatened species. So thank you very much for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Good. So I don't think there was a question that we can respond to in there other than an observation. And next up is Sharon Dundon, or at least labeled Sharon Donovan. Go ahead and identify yourself.
I'm Sharon Donovan. I live at 79 Pine Street, and I believe we've talked about a few of these issues, but I just wanted to mention the also in taking into consideration the amount of land that's going to be potentially developed and how that's going to affect the environment and wildlife. And I believe they are going to be doing a wildlife study. Is that correct?
We are doing the environmental impact statement for the planning board.
And I think we've also asked you to do the wildlife habitat assessment for the crossing, and then
for the BVW crossing, right?
But I'm also curious if you're going to give us an alternatives analysis in support of that limited crossing status, if you even get that far, the connectivity and fragmenting the habitat for vernal pool.
Right, I have that in my notes. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, habitat assessment or just vernal pool connectivity, whatever you want to call it. But yes, there'll be more than one, Sharon.
Okay. I just wanted to mention it. I know we see quite a few bats around our house, so I just wanted to mention that, and I think that's something that they're looking at closely lately. Also, I wanted to mention about the potential for filling in the wetlands so that they can add the additional 8 homes. And I'm just wondering why they needed to do that for another 8 homes if they're already building quite a few homes.
So I believe that was a part of the conventional plan that was put together. I'm just going back to the plan set and showing the sheet that had the expansive development, and this is what the applicant had put together to show if we proposed a conventional layout, what could be possible, and that totaled to 44 lots. So that sort of gets tied into the design of a cluster development, essentially not allowing them, but just sort of giving merit to asking for 44 lots by stating if I wasn't asking for the special permit, this is what I would be proposing otherwise.
And how many lots are with the cluster?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Oh, it's a 44 conventional. What's the cluster?
44.
Oh, it's the same.
Right.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
So my other observation, I think you mentioned there was something on the map that was about the wellhead protection area, and we talked about groundwater use that's in wells, and we already have a lot of issues with our water on Pine Street, and I believe it's due to a well that is close to where this project is going to be developed. So I just had some concerns about that.
That's the town well, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I just saw on that there was a wellhead protection area.
Yeah, that's the town wellhead protection area. I think the first thing you could probably do, because I walk this area quite a bit, is to get your the whole neighborhood stocked with dog crap there, because it is their drinking water supply.
Sorry, what was that?
You could probably ask the neighborhood to start picking up their dog food because it's all over the place in your wellhead, in your drinking water supply, which I find ironic.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but in all fairness, that's what the wetlands do, is filter out any bacteria that come from animal waste. And, you know, you can't stop
Well, let's
the
not create a
deer and
source.
the raccoons and the stuff and everything else. So that's why we like to keep the wetlands protected, is to be sure that what finally makes it into groundwater and aquifers is pure. Ms. Donovan, I don't know if you have any further comments, but if not, we will.
I just had one more
move on.
comment, and I'm not sure if this is at all possible, but the property out at where they're looking to develop is kind of a special area, and I don't know if you've ever been out here or if the Conservation Committee would take a little field trip to come visit the property.
Yeah, I was going to make a suggestion at the end of this hearing that we absolutely take this is screening for a site visit by the commission. We do them for larger projects.
Okay,
So,
great.
yeah,
Thank you,
we
that's
will-
it.
All right, and so next up on the list, I believe, is Karen Duhamel. At least that's the computer name.
Yes,
Go
this
ahead
is
and ask
Karen
your question.
Duhamel. Hi, it's Karen Duhamel. I'm at 82 Pine Street. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. So per the Norton zoning, dead-end streets should be 1,000 feet or less. If that bylaw applies, then Lloyd Circle would end before the wetland and no fill would be necessary. Is that correct?
All right. Well, I gotta say that's out of our purview. That's really a planning board wrestling match. So we're gonna say I don't think we can comment because we're not gonna add anything meaningful, and that's where planning can help you.
Okay, just want to bring some light on this.
All right. Any further questions? Otherwise, we'll go on to Jim and Brenda Carroll. So Jim and/or Brenda, you're up if you want to address your
Yes.
question.
This is Brenda Carroll, and Jim and Brenda live at 157 Pine Street, directly across from the proposed development. I noted that the conventional plan, there's some question about the interface of the wetlands delineations and the number of lots proposed. That potentially, I was wondering who determines the veracity of the 44 lots as they interface with the wetlands delineation.
Oh, so that's probably the upland buildable ratio that the planning or zoning requires.
Okay, all right.
So in other words, they carve out the lots, and the lots have to meet the minimum criteria in terms of size and frontage and setbacks, things like that. That's a zoning planning board issue yet again.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we don't see any more hands up displayed, and unless there are questions, clearly this will need to be continued. I think Claire has a laundry list of things that have to be addressed. Do we actually have a number here? So that's not an issue outstanding. But our next meeting is on the 25th. I don't know if that's too soon to address all these issues.
I would say it's too soon, especially I would like to see the sort of updated Horsley Witten comment letter that was submitted today. And I think we would like to have a chance to respond to that in writing and respond to commission members' concerns and abutter concerns in writing before we would present again. And we'd probably like to be able to submit that and give all the commission members a chance to review it and the peer reviewers a chance to review it as well. So I definitely think continuing beyond the 25th would be advisable.
So the next meeting after that is the 8th of August. Now, before we go further, I just need to give everybody a heads up that while this is a Zoom remote meeting, we were scheduled to go to in-person meetings for our next meeting. So just be aware, but that is still in flux because it was brought to our attention that there is now yet another bill in the legislature to potentially extend the time of remote meetings. So please be aware that you have to clarify exactly where the meeting is going to be, whether it's going to be an in-person meeting or remote with regard to any members who want to follow this. So I think unless there are further comments, questions, we can consider a motion for a continuation of this hearing for file number 250-1104 until August 8th.
So moved. Second.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Carrie, seconded by Dan for continuation of the hearing till August 8th. A roll call vote beginning with Ron and Carrie.
Aye.
Aye.
And Dan and Lisa.
Aye.
Aye.
And we have Tama and Mark.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. So we'll see everyone either in person or on Zoom on August 8th for this particular hearing.
Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for concerned citizens participating.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda, don't have any, we have public hearings. Yes, okay. I might have misspoke with regard to our, just to make a notation. I might have given the wrong DEP number by accident. The correct DEP number for the Pine Street cluster is 250-1105. But our next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for a continued public hearing, 0 rear 80th Street for White Oak Share Corporation. This is a project that has been continued multiple times, and they are requesting another continuance until July 25th. So I'm looking for a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Dan and seconded by Mark for continuation of file number 250-1070, 0 rear Eddy Street. Roll call vote beginning with Lisa and Dan.
Aye.
Aye.
And Mark and Tama.
Aye.
Aye.
Carrie and Ron.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. The motion carries. The next item, also a continued public hearing, file number 250-1093, concerning a notice of intent for 70 Oak Street. And there's no indication on the agenda whether they're requesting a continuation, or do we have a...
They have requested a continuation, yes.
Okay, and they didn't give us a specific time frame, so presumably our next meeting will be suitable. So again, a motion for continuation till July 25th.
I'll make a motion to continue public hearing for file 250-1093 for the August 8th hearing.
Second.
Motion made by Lisa, seconded by Dan. Roll call vote starting with Dan and Mark.
Aye.
Aye.
and Tama and Carrie,
Aye.
and Lisa and Ron.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye, so the motion carries. Our next item is file number 250-1104, notice of intent for 199 Plain Street concerning Norton Water and Sewer with regard to replacement of well 4. I think we had all the information. We were just waiting for a file number, and that has come through. I don't know if we have a representative, because I don't think.
Yes, Alexandra Gaspar from Weston and Sampson. But yeah, it was my understanding that we were essentially waiting for a DEP number for this. But happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I don't know if we have any questions. Anybody have any questions? Otherwise, we can proceed to close. And then we do have an order. Question?
Just a quick one. Just curious. This is production well number 4 that is being replaced. Does that mean that there are 4 production wells, or it's just that this is the 4th well and it's happens to be a production well?
I am not sure. I know that we've done permitting for wells 5 and 6, so I think I'm not sure how many total there are.
That's all right. I'm just
yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, our obviously our water department can tell you all of the details, but
There are 5 active wells in Norton.
and one of them is on behind Red Mill Village, and then we have the Plain Street wells, and I thought there was a 3rd area, but maybe Megan, maybe you can. I might have misspoke. It said Plain instead of Pine Street. But is it just Pine Street in the Newland Street area?
That should be Plain and Pine, both have wells on them.
Okay. All right. Does that help, Dan?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, we have some terminology here, and I don't really know what it means, but that's all right. I will take your advice and go to the Water and Sewage Commission.
Yeah, and you know, on our prior plan, as far as I know, the manganese and iron problem is primarily due to the Pine Street wells, and on the plan, the huge sand filter field was visible on one of the aerial photos visible. So, but that's kind of another topic. I think everything else, we have all the information with regard to the replacement of well 4, and unless there's further discussion, we can consider a motion to close this public hearing.
I'll make a motion. So moved.
Motion made by Dan, seconded by Ron, to close public hearing for file number 250-1104. Roll call vote again. Dan and Mark, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye. And Tama and Carrie.
Aye.
Aye.
And Lisa and Ron.
Aye.
Abstain.
And I will vote an aye. And we now, next item of business, it's actually not, it's not listed on the agenda, but I had included in my agenda package an order of conditions for this project. I'm assuming others also have that, and that would be the next item on our agenda. Everybody else got that in their package info? And I've gone through it. I don't find anything that requires alteration in the draft that John provided.
If it's not specifically on the agenda, though, can we do it?
Yes, because you normally, if you vote to put it to the order of conditions, like you vote to close and then do the order of conditions, it's not always on there.
Okay.
You usually, if it's ready, we'll do it. Sometimes
Okay.
it's not ready. Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah, and just for clarification, so Megan, John completed this with the intention that we would be acting on it tonight, I'm assuming.
Yes, but we didn't have the DEP number at that time.
Right. Okay. So, it's pretty standard stuff to my reading. I don't know, did you have a chance to review it, Lisa? You go over these with eagle eyes.
No, it's just missing the public hearing dates, number 16.
Right.
That's the only thing I noticed. So do we have those filled in, Megan?
Yeah, I'll fill them in tomorrow. I have all the public hearing dates.
All right, it sounds like maybe we're ready for a motion.
I'd like to comment before we sound up.
Ron, you just flicked on the mute button. Try again.
I'd like to comment on the water treatment by Solitude Lake Management.
Oh, somehow you lost it again.
I'd like to comment about the water treatment by Solitude Lake Management. Originally, it was scheduled for June 27th. They only posted the notices 2 days before that. And a couple of days after they said they did the treatment. A week later, they came back and said they didn't do the treatment. Now they've got it rescheduled to July 15th. And it doesn't sound like they know what they're doing there. I don't know if there's any alternatives.
Who holds the we won't get tired. I am tired. We're probably under contract, right? So is it the town manager? Somebody needs to pull a contract and see what their obligation is.
Yeah, it's the town manager, and they are only required to post signs on like the telephone poles, and that's their kind of notification to abutters, and in the Sun Chronicle. So when they re-notified that they were going to be doing the new treatment on July 15th, I sent out mailings to all the abutters for the treatment areas.
All right. Well, let's jump back though to the order of conditions for 250-1104. They were suggested to be modified to put the hearing dates in, and Megan's going to do that. So I think we can consider a motion to accept the order of conditions as submitted and amended. Everybody worn out by that hearing?
So moved.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion by Ron, and I think Mark did you throw in the second?
I did, yes.
Okay, seconded by Mark. So again, a roll call vote, starting with Dan and Mark.
Aye.
Aye.
And Tama and Carrie.
Aye.
Aye.
And Lisa and Ron.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. Oh, no, this was not the one you had to abstain on.
Oh no, I wasn't at the hearing. That's why I'm just not voting on it. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Ron, I think, you know, we need to, if there are further items on this lake treatment issue, that we need to bring it up to John when he returns, and he'll ride shotgun with the town manager to be sure that there are no more gaffes with regard to this. So I think that's the way to go. And Megan, maybe you could be sure to bring that to John's attention when he returns. He's returning by the 18th, was it?
To be in on Monday. Yep.
Okay.
So Ron, do you think they have to re-notify now because it's in August? No, it's end of July, right?
July 15th is the treatment date. They said they put it in the paper and they had already posted the signs up, but then I sent out abutter notifications because people weren't notified. People were complaining they weren't, informed properly.
No, they did this time post the notices in advance and in many places. The first time for the June 27th supposed treatment, there were very few put up. And they was only put up 2 days. The ones that were put up on, I think it was June 25th.
All right. Well, we'll need to make sure they pay attention to those issues. So I think potentially our last item on the agenda is review draft minutes of 6/27. I assume you all got those minutes in your or electronically. And there seems to be an error with regard to members present versus members absent.
Yes, I saw that too. Tama actually told me about it this morning, and I was like, oops, I guess you can't be there and not be there at the same time.
Yeah. Well, it depends on which universe you're in, but in this universe, you're right.
Right, and I was there, so you can add my name.
Yes, right. That needs to be added because you clearly participate quite a bit in the minutes. So I suppose you could not be there and be there at the same time too, but I've never really fully understood quantum physics. So we'll leave that aside.
Well, maybe Megan was just watching Doctor Strange or something.
I wish.
Or she could have been watching the January 6th hearings. It might compete with that. So, but with that correction, perhaps we can consider a motion.
Just one other minor change, Megan. In the recording of the votes, my name is spelled M-A-R-K. It's M-A-R-C. You could just do a find and replace.
Oh yeah, perfect.
It was correct up above on the members present, but
Okay, I'll fix that. Thank you.
thanks.
All right, I'll be looking for a motion unless there are further comments.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to accept as modified, amended, I should say. Motion made by Ron, seconded by Mark. And with regard to our roll call vote, Lisa and Tama, I assume will be registering an abstention. So Dan, you throw in a yes. Mark, I'm assuming you're a yes.
Yes.
And Carrie and Ron.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. Motion carries. I think that does it. We're getting back to the old style meetings.
So I assume at the next hearing, we will potentially discuss site visit to the Pine Street project.
You broke up a little bit. Could you just say that one more
At the
time?
next hearing, I assume we will discuss a potential site visit date for Pine Street.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And so Megan, you will need to clarify to us where we're going to meet the next time, or how we're going to meet.
So right now it's scheduled for the Norton Town Library. I have it posted. I have an ad going out in the paper for one of the new projects that came in, saying that it's at the library. And now we've been informed that things are being extended. So it'll probably still be at the library for the next meeting, but I don't know if we'll go back to virtual after that.
But even though we can do virtual, we can decide to go in person.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are starting to do hybrids, and I think part of the new legislation that they're trying to push is that hybrids will be mandatory.
Oh, okay. Well, stay tuned. So I think until that gets resolved, we can adjourn.
And say congratulations to John.
All right, we have a motion made to adjourn, and I assume, Dan, that was a second to that motion.
That's also a second.
So
it's a second.
Okay. So thank you all, and we'll meet up next time, one way or the other.
Have a good night.
Good night.